another Tales of the Deadwax. As you can tell from the intro, I'm covering Sterling Sound Labs. Sterling Sound Labs is probably the preeminent mastering studio in North America, probably one of the best known. Now, there have probably been 20-25 individuals that have worked there over the decades, and it would be impossible to cover all those guys in a single video. From a Deadwax perspective, probably only about a half of those guys actually put any unique inscription in the Deadwax, and more often than not you're just going to see Sterling, but there are some individuals that did put something in the Deadwax. The first individual, if you didn't recognize him from the intro, that I am going to be covering today is George Marino. George Marino is just a fantastic individual. To me, he was a rock star of a mastering engineer. He first came to my consciousness in 1990 when the first Led Zeppelin box set came out. And he was given preeminent mastering credit on the back of the box. And I want to say that I've seen his name used on different hype stickers. So if you're given preeminent mastering credit on the box or on a hype sticker, you have hit mastering superstardom. And George Marino was definitely a mastering superstar. There's some debate on, how good his mastering was. But for the most part, I like the sound of the albums that he cut, and he cut thousands, and he cut most of the big names out there. Now, unfortunately, we lost George to cancer in 2012, but I did want to highlight some of the last projects that he did work on. And around 2000, AC/DC signed a deal with Columbia Sony, and they decided to reissue all of their catalog. And so George did the remastering of these from the original analog master tapes. Now, I don't think he did all the vinyl cuts. In fact, I know he didn't do all the vinyl cuts. I think that he probably did a digital transfer of his mastering, and then he turned it over to somebody else to cut the lacquers. So if you look at the Deadwax, and on most of these you're going to see RJ at Sterling, and RJ is Ray Janos. Now, how do they compare to the original? Sometimes the originals get the edge, but for the most part, I think these sound fantastic. And again, just to show you, they gave him preeminent mastering credit here. One other project that he worked on towards the latter part of his life was commissioned by the Hendrix estate, and so all the Hendrix albums were reissued. And again, this is something that he was given preeminent mastering credit, like I'm showing you here. And to my ears, these sound fantastic. Again, this is something that's debated. I mean, people say that the originals sound better. I'd really like to do a shootout sometime just to see how these stack up, but these are really good for the price, and I honestly think that George Marino did a fantastic job with these. Now, towards the last few years of his life, when he was diagnosed with cancer, he had to cut back on his work schedule, and he started to mentor and tutor Ryan K. Smith, who is really kind of the guy I want to feature here. And Ryan, the first album that Ryan ever cut was Paul Simon's Graceland. Now, this album was also cut by another Sterling mastering engineer named Greg Calaby. Now, Greg commented that he thought that Ryan K. Smith did a better job, and I'd have to say that yes, this is it's not light years above an original, but it is better than what Greg had originally done. Now, the album is just fantastically produced to begin with anyway, so, but Ryan does put his initials in the Deadwax, and you see RKS and then Sterling. And this guy was pressed at RTI, and if you see it, grab it. It's a wonderful album. Now, Ryan started to build up his street cred, and people started to take notice. And so a lot of the reissue labels, if they needed to have a album remastered and the tapes were on the East Coast, more often than not they are going to Ryan now. And Analog Productions is one of those companies. So Analog Productions has done 25 of the Living Stereo reissues now. The original sound fantastic. Ryan did a wonderful job of this. And Chad Kasem, the owner of Analog Productions, said, hey, I want it to sound better than the original. Now, I don't have an original of the Scheherazade from Rimsky-Korsakov to compare it to, but this just sounds fantastic. And this one has a variation of his signature in the Deadwax. I do know he cut it because it's inside the book that said that, yeah, he was given his marching orders from Chad. And you see RS, and I don't know what the other initials here stand for. So if any of you know, please tell me. I'd be curious. Now, one of my favorite Ted Nugent albums. Ted is kind of a polarizing figure. I don't agree with his politics, but if there's one Ted Nugent album you have to own, it is this guy here, and Analog Productions chose to reissue it. And they used Ryan for the remastering job. And I have an original. It's probably a second press on Epic. It doesn't use the original label like I'm showing you here, and it's an L, or it's a ladder stamping, a stamper I'm showing you here. But when you compare the two, this just has so much more detail, and this feels like there's like a sheet over your speakers in some degree. But I'd like to give you a sound sample, and you tell me which sounds better, the 79 repress or the Analog Productions version. And you know, this just comes in a wonderful gatefold. So, and 200 gram vinyl. So here's a sound sample. Let me know what you think. Another group that Ryan was commissioned to do for Sony was all the Aerosmith reissues. So all these ones that have been coming out in record store days past and then later officially released, he's done all those. And so like I'm showing you here, you see the standard RKS and the Deadwax. These sound phenomenal. And this is probably another one I want to do a shootout. Fortunately, I don't have a sound sample of this, but I love these, and you know, you can still get these relatively cheap if you're an Aerosmith fan, and you've compared the two. Let me know what you think, but I love these, and I highly recommend going for them if you can find them. Analog Spark is another label, reissue label that has been up and coming this past couple of years. They are ones that are reissuing old jazz, old classical, old Broadway standard albums, old folk albums, as a matter of fact. They got Ryan to do Duke Ellington Uptown. Now, I picked this one up and I wasn't very optimistic about the sound quality. I have it on CD. CD sounds okay, but listening to this, I was just amazed about how well the recording was done. The percussion comes across so well, and I want to give you a sample of this one so you can hear what this one sounds like. So here you go. So what did you think of this one? This one, you know, again, you see the RKS and the Deadwax. This was pressed at RTI and just sounds wonderful. Now, the last one that I want to show you was really kind of the driver to do this episode today. And this was the Vinyl Me Please release from last month. And this is Nina Simone Sings the Blues. I was just flabbergasted that, you know, they got Ryan to do the mastering for this one. I think this is going to be released on black vinyl, or if it was originally released on black vinyl. I'm sorry, I didn't do my research before doing this video, but Vinyl Me Please did it on this blue colored vinyl. Here you are, you're seeing the RKS in the Deadwax. The only unfortunate thing about this was it was pressed at GZ. My copy happens to sound just fine. This was actually a real surprise. I really enjoyed this album. I haven't agreed with all Vinyl Me Please's picks. I think they're doing a good job at trying to get a diverse set of albums. But I haven't, just my personal taste, I haven't enjoyed all of them, but I did enjoy this one. If you can find it on black vinyl, I'd say go for it. I do want to give you a sample of this one, so here you go.
Are you willing? Do I groove you? Is it thrilling? Do I soothe you? Tell the truth now.
So that was Nina Simone, and that's all I have for you today. There's a bunch of other examples I could show you, but if you see that Ryan Smith mastered it, or you see Sterling mastered some of this newer released vinyl, I say pick it up. It should sound excellent. What are your thoughts on Sterling's sound? Do you have any experience with George Marino or Ryan K. Smith? Shoot me a comment down below. I enjoy the interaction, and thank you for watching.